When my mother-in-law pointed her manicured finger at me and told the police I'd sold my own daughter, I thought that was the worst moment of my life. But then my 8-year-old son whispered 7 words that made every officer in that room go pale. My name is Melinda, and I'm 34 years old. For the past 12 years, I've worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Medical Center in Riverside. It's not glamorous work, but there's something deeply fulfilling about helping sick children heal, about being the calm voice that tells a terrified parent their baby is going to be okay. I chose this profession because I wanted to make a difference, to be someone families could trust during their darkest moments. I never imagined I'd become the parent everyone suspected of the unthinkable. My daughter Josie had just turned 6, 2 months before that horrible Tuesday. She was the kind of child who made friends with everyone she met, from the grocery store clerk to the mailman who delivered our packages. Her kindergarten teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, called her a ray of sunshine in the classroom. Josie had this way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something, the same gesture her father used to make. She collected rainbow stickers, insisted on wearing mismatched socks because it was more fun that way, and could spend hours creating elaborate stories with her stuffed animals. Every night she'd ask me to check under her bed for monsters, not because she was scared, but because she wanted to invite them to tea if they were friendly ones. Her older brother Brody was 8, and he took his role as big brother more seriously than some adults take their careers. Where Josie was pure sunshine and creativity, Brody was thoughtful and protective. He walked her to her classroom every morning, even though it meant being a few minutes late to his own. He saved half his allowance to buy her favorite candy when she had a bad day. His teachers said he was mature for his age, maybe too mature, but that's what happens when a boy loses his father at 6 years old. He'd stepped into a role nobody asked him to fill, trying to be the man of the house when he should have been focused on Pokemon cards and soccer practice. Then there was Francine, my mother-in-law. At 62, she maintained herself like she was preparing for a photo shoot at any moment. Her silver hair was styled weekly at the same salon she'd been going to for 20 years. Her house, a pristine colonial in the best part of Riverside, looked like something from a home decorating magazine. Every surface gleamed, every pillow was perfectly placed, and God help you if you forgot to use a coaster. She'd raised 2 children in that house, my late husband Dale and his sister Rebecca, though Rebecca lived in Oregon now and only called on holidays. Dale had been gone for 2 years. The trucking accident happened on a rainy Thursday morning on Interstate 40. They said he died instantly, that he didn't suffer. I suppose that was meant to be comforting, but all I could think about was how he'd kissed me goodbye that morning, told me he'd be home for Brody's baseball game, and then simply never came back. The life insurance helped with immediate expenses, but a nurse's salary barely covered our rent, utilities, and the endless costs of raising 2 growing children. That's why I'd accepted Francine's offer to watch the kids after school. Family helps family, she'd said at Dale's funeral, gripping my hands with her cold fingers. Those babies need stability, Melinda. They need to know they're loved. I should have recognized the criticism hidden in her concern, the way she emphasized stability as if I was inherently unstable. But grief makes you miss things you'd normally catch, and free childcare isn't something a single mother turns down easily. The relationship between Francine and me had always been strained. From the moment Dale introduced us, I could see the disappointment in her eyes. I wasn't from Riverside's established families. My parents ran a small hardware store 2 towns over. I'd worked my way through nursing school, waiting tables and taking overnight shifts at a gas station. Meanwhile, the girl Francine had picked out for Dale, Stephanie Pemberton, had gone to law school and now worked at a prestigious firm downtown. Francine mentioned this at every opportunity, usually preceded by a wistful sigh. But I'd loved Dale with everything I had, and he'd loved me back. We'd built a life together, imperfect but ours. Now that life was gone, and I was left navigating not just my own grief, but my children's, all while under the watchful, critical eye of a woman who'd never wanted me in her family to begin with. That Tuesday in October started like hundreds of others, with no warning that by nightfall, our world would shatter completely. Life wasn't perfect, but we'd found our rhythm. After Dale died, I moved us from our house in Millbrook to a smaller apartment just 15 minutes from Francine's home in Riverside. The kids needed their grandmother, I told myself. They'd lost their father. Maintaining that family connection felt crucial. Looking back, I can see how grief clouded my judgment, how desperately I wanted to believe that Francine's coldness toward me wouldn't affect her relationship with Josie and Brody. Our new apartment was nothing special. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen so small you couldn't open the dishwasher and the oven at the same time. But I'd worked hard to make it feel like home. Josie's side of the kids' room exploded with color, her artwork taped to every available surface. Brody's side was neater, his soccer trophies lined up on a shelf Dale had built for him the year before he died. In the living room, I'd hung our family photos, including ones with Dale, because pretending he'd never existed seemed worse than the daily reminder of what we'd lost. My shifts at Children's Medical Center typically ran from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, 3 or 4 days a week. The pay was decent, but after rent, utilities, groceries, and school expenses, there wasn't much left. Josie had been asking about dance classes for months, watching YouTube videos of ballerinas on my phone and practicing pirouettes in our living room. Each time she asked, I promised we'd look into it next month, hoping she wouldn't notice that next month never seemed to come. The arrangement with Francine had seemed like a blessing at first. She picked the kids up from school on my workdays, kept them until I could collect them after my shift. Her house was certainly more appealing than our cramped apartment. She had a massive backyard with a swing set Dale had assembled when he was in high school, still sturdy after all these years. The attic held treasures from Dale's childhood, including a dollhouse that had belonged to Rebecca when she was young. Josie could spend hours up there, lost in imaginary worlds, but over the past few months I'd noticed changes. Small things at first. Brody became quieter after afternoons at Grandma's. Josie, usually bouncing off the walls with energy, would climb into my car looking tired and subdued. When I asked about their day, they'd exchange glances before offering generic responses. "It was fine," became Brody's standard answer. Josie would just say, "Grandma has lots of rules." The rules. Francine had always been particular, but lately she'd become almost militant. No shoes past the foyer, no snacks outside the kitchen, no touching the antique furniture in the formal living room. Homework had to be completed in absolute silence. Even bathroom breaks were monitored and limited. "Structure is what these children need," Francine told me when I gently suggested she might be a bit strict. Heaven knows they don't get enough of it at home. The previous week, something had shifted. Josie came home on Monday with red eyes, though Francine insisted she hadn't been crying. On Tuesday, Brody mentioned that Grandma had added a new rule about a room in the basement being completely off limits. "She put a lock on it," he'd said, confusion clear in his voice. "She said it's dangerous, but it's just the old storage room. We used to play hide and seek there." That same evening, as I tucked Josie into bed, she'd grab my hand with her small fingers. "Grandma's house feels different now, Mommy," she'd whispered. "Different how, sweetheart?" She gets really mad when we make mistakes. Last week, I accidentally knocked over a picture frame, and she made me sit in the corner for an hour. She said I was careless, just like you. The comment stung, but I'd pushed it aside. Francine was grieving too, I reasoned. We all were. Maybe she was just struggling to manage 2 energetic children. I promised myself I'd talk to her about it, find a gentle way to address her harsh discipline without causing conflict. That Tuesday morning, October 15th, I dropped the kids at school as usual. Josie hugged me extra long at the kindergarten door, her small arms wrapped tight around my neck. "Love you to the moon and back, Mommy," she said, our special phrase. "Love you to the stars and beyond," I replied, kissing her forehead. Brody had soccer practice after school with his friend Tommy's dad coaching, so Francine would only have Josie that afternoon. It should have been easier for her, I thought, 1 child instead of 2. As I scrubbed in for my first surgery of the day, I had no idea those would be the last normal moments we'd share for a very long time. At 7:43 p.m., my phone rang during my break. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a sad-looking salad and reviewing patient charts when Francine's name flashed on the screen. She rarely called, preferring clipped text messages, so I answered immediately. "Josie's gone," she said without preamble, her voice ice cold. "I've already called the police." The plastic fork fell from my hand. "What do you mean, gone?" "She was playing in the backyard. I went inside for 5 minutes to answer the phone, and when I came back, she'd vanished." The gate was open. She's nowhere in the neighborhood. This is what happens when children don't have proper supervision, Melinda. Even in that moment of pure terror, she couldn't resist the dig. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse. I'm coming right now. The police are already here. They'll want to question you, of course, about your whereabouts, your financial situation. These things have to be thoroughly investigated. The drive to Francine's house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I ran 3 red lights and nearly sideswiped a parked car turning onto her street. The colonial house that usually looked so pristine was now surrounded by 3 police cruisers, their lights painting the neighborhood in alternating red and blue. Neighbors stood on their lawns in clusters, whispering behind their hands. Mrs. Canton from next door was talking to an officer, gesturing animatedly. When she saw me pull up, she immediately looked away. I ran through the front door to find Francine holding court in her living room, surrounded by 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a rumpled suit. She was the picture of an elegant grandmother in distress, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, though I noticed her makeup remained perfect. "Where's my daughter?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Detective Rivera, according to his badge, turned to me with professionally neutral expression. "You're the mother." That's when Francine stood up, pointing directly at me with a perfectly manicured finger. Her voice carried clearly, loud enough for the neighbors gathered at the windows to hear. "There she is. Check her finances. She's been struggling since Dale died, always complaining about money. She probably sold that little girl." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" "Ma'am, we'll need to ask you some questions," Detective Rivera said carefully, but I could see how his eyes had changed, how Francine's accusation had planted a seed of suspicion. "She's unstable," Francine continued, tears now streaming down her face in a practiced way. "Last week she mentioned how expensive Josie's dance classes were, said she couldn't afford them anymore. Then suddenly, today, she texts that she'll be late again. Convenient timing, isn't it?" "I was at work, in surgery. You can check with the hospital." Francine turned to the growing audience of officers and neighbors. "She has access to all sorts of medications at that hospital. Who knows what she's involved in? Drug debts, trafficking. You should search her house immediately. Check her phone records. That poor baby could be anywhere by now." Mrs. Canton had moved closer to the window, her phone clearly recording everything. I heard her whisper to her husband, "I always thought something was off about her, the way she'd leave those kids with Francine so often." Detective Rivera raised his hand for silence. "Mrs. Morrison, we need facts, not speculation. These are serious accusations you're making." "I'm just trying to help find my granddaughter," Francine sobbed. "Someone has to advocate for that innocent child. Her mother clearly won't." "Ma'am," Rivera turned to me, his tone formal now, "we will need to search your residence. It's standard procedure in missing child cases. Officers Martinez and Williams will accompany you." "This is insane. My daughter is missing and you're treating me like a suspect?" "Everyone's a suspect until we find the child," Rivera said. "The faster we can clear you, the faster we can focus on other possibilities." Francine sat back down, clutching her pearls. "Check her bank records, too. She had a life insurance policy on both children. I heard her on the phone with the insurance company just last month." That was a lie. I'd been calling about dental coverage, but I could see how the neighbors were looking at me now, how the story was already forming in their minds. The struggling single mother, the overwhelmed nurse with access to drugs, the woman who'd married above her station and couldn't handle the pressure. "Please," I begged Detective Rivera, "every second we waste here is a second my daughter is out there somewhere. She's 6 years old, she's scared of the dark, she needs her stuffed rabbit to sleep." But Francine's performance had done its job. The seeds of doubt were planted, and they were growing fast. 2 officers accompanied me to our apartment, while others searched Francine's property. Officers Martinez and Williams followed me in their cruiser, and I could feel the weight of every neighbor's stare as we pulled away from Francine's house. The 15-minute drive felt endless, my mind racing between terror for Josie and rage at Francine's accusations. At our apartment, the officers were thorough, but not unkind. Martinez, a young woman with sympathetic eyes, tried to make small talk while they searched. "Nice drawings," she said, looking at Josie's artwork on the refrigerator. "She's talented." "She wants to be an artist when she grows up," I said, my voice breaking. Or a veterinarian. She changes her mind every week. They went through everything. Josie's rainbow-colored backpack, still packed with tomorrow's homework. Her bed with the unicorn sheets I'd bought on sale last month. They checked my closet, my dresser drawers, even looked inside the washing machine. Williams examined my laptop while Martinez went through my phone, checking texts, emails, bank statements. No large deposits or withdrawals, Martinez murmured to her partner. Last unusual expense was $70 at Target for kids' winter coats. Meanwhile, back at Francine's house, Detective Rivera was interviewing Brody. My son had been picked up from soccer practice and brought directly to the scene. Someone had given him a glass of water, and he sat on Francine's pristine white couch, still in his muddy soccer uniform, something that would normally have sent Francine into a fury. Later, Rivera would tell me exactly how that conversation unfolded. He'd started with gentle questions, trying to make Brody comfortable. "Hey, buddy, I know this is scary. We're all working really hard to find your sister. Can you tell me about today? Did Josie seem okay at school this morning?" Brody nodded, his hands wrapped tight around the glass. "She was happy. She showed me a picture she drew of our family. She made Dad an angel with really big wings." "That's nice. And your grandmother? Does Josie like going to her house after school?" Brody's eyes darted to Francine, who was sitting across the room, watching intently. "She used to," he said carefully. "Used to." "Can I talk to you alone?" Brody asked, his voice small but determined. Francine stood up immediately, her voice sharp with authority. "That's inappropriate. I'm his grandmother. I should be present for any questioning of a minor. It's not just proper protocol, it's the law." Rivera looked at her calmly. "Actually, ma'am, we often speak to children privately in these situations. They sometimes feel more comfortable sharing information without family members present. This is ridiculous. I'm trying to help find my granddaughter, and you're treating me with suspicion." I had returned by then, cleared by the officers who found nothing suspicious at our apartment. I walked in just as this exchange was happening. "Mom," I said, finding strength in my voice, "let him talk, please. This is about finding Josie." Francine's face flushed red, but she sat back down, her lips pressed into a thin line. Detective Rivera led Brody to the kitchen, and through the doorway I watched my brave 8-year-old son become a hero. His hands moved as he talked, pointing downward repeatedly. Rivera's expression changed as Brody spoke, first showing confusion, then concern, then something that looked like alarm. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call, his voice too low to hear. When they returned to the living room, Rivera's entire demeanor had shifted. He was no longer treating this as a possible runaway situation or stranger abduction. His eyes were fixed on Francine with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. "Mrs. Morrison," he said formally, "we need to search your entire house, including the basement." "You already searched it," Francine protested, her voice rising slightly. "Your officers were very thorough." Brody mentioned a locked room, one you told the children never to enter. The color drained from Francine's face so completely that for a moment she looked like a corpse. "That's just storage, old furniture. It's dangerous for children. Exposed nails, unstable stacks of boxes." "Then you won't mind opening it," Rivera said. It wasn't a question. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Francine's grandfather clock. Every neighbor still gathered outside seemed to hold their breath. Brody moved closer to me, and I put my arm around him, pulling him tight against my side. That's when my son spoke up, his young voice cutting through the tension, like a blade. "Grandma has a locked room in her basement. Yesterday, when Josie spilled juice on Grandma's antique tablecloth, she said my sister needed to be taught a lesson about respecting valuable things. Then today, I heard crying from downstairs, but Grandma said it was just the TV." Every officer in that room went pale. Rivera's hand moved to his radio, and I saw Martinez's hand drift toward her weapon, though she didn't draw it. The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. This was no longer a missing child case. This had become something else entirely. Francine's hands trembled as she fumbled with her key ring, the metallic jingling the only sound in the room besides my hammering heartbeat. Every eye was fixed on her as she sorted through at least a dozen keys with exaggerated slowness. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice pitched higher than normal. "I'm trying to help find my granddaughter, and you're treating me like a criminal. That room is dangerous. I locked it to protect the children, not to hide anything." Detective Rivera stood directly behind her. "Then opening it should clear this right up, Mrs. Morrison." We descended into the basement as a group. Rivera led, followed by Francine, then me and Brody, with officers Martinez and Williams bringing up the rear. The finished basement looked exactly as it always had, with beige carpet, wood paneling, and framed photos of Dale's childhood lining the walls. The main area held a leather sectional and a large TV where the kids usually watched movies on rainy days, but at the far end, past the laundry area, was a door I'd honestly never paid attention to before. It was painted the same shade as the walls, designed to blend in, practically invisible unless you were looking for it. A brass deadbolt had been installed recently. I could see fresh scratches on the door frame where it had been mounted. "Open it," Detective Rivera commanded. "I don't have to do anything without a warrant," Francine said, attempting defiance, but her voice shook. "Mrs. Morrison, a child is missing. Your grandchild. If she's not in that room, then we've wasted precious time. But if there's even a chance she's in there, every second counts. Open the door or we'll break it down." Francine's facade finally cracked. Her hands shook so badly she could barely get the key in the lock. The deadbolt clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. The door swung inward, and there, in a small room no bigger than 8 by 10 feet, was my daughter. Josie sat on a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner, her knees pulled up to her chest, her face streaked with tears. A bucket sat in one corner. Water bottles and granola bars were stacked against the wall. Most horrifying of all, there was a child's workbook on the floor beside her, its cover reading, "Learning, Respect, and Obedience," in stern black letters. "Mommy!" Josie launched herself at me, her small body shaking with sobs. I fell to my knees and caught her, pulling her against me so tightly I was probably hurting her, but I couldn't let go. She was real. She was alive. She was here. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe now," I whispered into her hair, which smelled wrong, like basement and fear instead of her strawberry shampoo. Detective Rivera was already on his radio. "We found her. We need child services and additional units immediately." He turned to Francine, his face a mask of professional disgust. "Francine Morrison, you're under arrest for child endangerment, false imprisonment, and filing a false police report." "She needed to learn," Francine said, her voice taking on an eerie, detached quality. "Children these days have no discipline, no respect for their elders or for valuable things. When Dale was young, a few hours in the quiet room taught him manners. Sometimes he'd stay overnight if the lesson was particularly important. It's not abuse, it's parenting. Something you clearly know nothing about, Melinda." Martinez moved forward with handcuffs while Williams read Francine her rights. The neighbors who had followed us down were now recording everything on their phones, their expressions shifting from suspicion of me to absolute horror at what they were witnessing. "I was trying to save her," Francine shouted as they cuffed her, addressing the neighbors directly. "To raise her properly. Look at how Melinda lives, that cramped apartment, no money for proper activities, leaving them with me constantly. I was going to prove she was unfit, and then I could keep them, raise them right, in a proper home with proper values." Mrs. Canton, who had been recording since we entered the basement, lowered her phone. Her face was white with shock. "My God, Francine, my God, that's your granddaughter. She's 6 years old." Still clinging to me, Josie whispered something that shattered my heart into a million pieces. "Grandma said if I was very quiet and very good, she'd let me out tomorrow and tell everyone you took me. She said then she could keep us forever and raise us right." I was trying to be good, Mommy. I was trying so hard to be quiet, but I was so scared, and I had to use the bucket, and I'm so embarrassed. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about, sweetheart. Nothing at all. You were so brave, so incredibly brave." Brody knelt beside us, wrapping his arms around both of us. "I knew something was wrong," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry, Josie. I'm so sorry." The next 3 hours blurred together in a chaos of official procedures. Paramedics examined Josie in the ambulance while I held her hand, refusing to let go even when they needed to check her vitals. She was dehydrated and emotionally traumatized, but physically unharmed. The doctor at the emergency room, a colleague of mine named Dr. Patel, kept his voice gentle and calm as he examined her, shooting me looks of sympathy and disbelief over her small head. Child Services interviewed all of us separately. Brody told them about other incidents we hadn't known about, times when Francine had made Josie stand in the corner for hours for minor infractions, like speaking too loudly or forgetting to say please. He'd been keeping a list in his school notebook, dates and punishments, because even at 8 years old, he knew something was terribly wrong. The truth unraveled quickly once the police started investigating properly. Francine had been planning this for months. In her home office, they found a folder labeled custody documentation, filled with photos she'd taken of our apartment at its messiest, recordings of me talking about financial stress, and a detailed log of every time I was late picking up the kids. She'd even hired a private investigator 2 months ago to follow me, hoping to catch me doing something inappropriate. The investigator had found nothing and refused to continue the job, disturbed by what he called Francine's obsessive behavior. The workbook she'd left in that room was something she'd ordered from a fringe parenting website that advocated isolation as discipline. There were pages for Josie to complete with lines like, "I will respect grandmother's things," "I will not waste food," and "I will be grateful for correction." Some pages were already filled out in Josie's shaky handwriting, the letters getting progressively worse as her fear had grown. 3 months later, we were living in a different district, in a new apartment I'd found with help from a victims assistance program. The kids had chosen it themselves from 3 options, picking the one with the most windows and no basement. It had a small balcony where Josie could grow flowers and a park across the street where Brody joined a new soccer team. The commute to work was longer, but the peace of mind was worth every extra minute in traffic. During Francine's trial, more disturbing details emerged. Dale's sister Rebecca testified via video link from Oregon, revealing that Francine had done this once before. When Rebecca was 7, she'd been locked in the same room for 2 days for breaking a china teacup. Dale, only 5 at the time, had been told his sister was visiting an aunt. The family had covered it up, called it a misunderstanding, and never spoke of it again. Rebecca hadn't seen or spoken to Francine in 20 years, and Dale had never known the real reason for his sister's absence from family gatherings. Francine was sentenced to 5 years in prison. She never apologized, never showed remorse. In her mind, she remained the victim, a grandmother trying to save her grandchildren from an unfit mother. During her sentencing, she actually told the judge that she'd done nothing worse than what parents did in the old days, when children knew respect and discipline. The neighbors who had been so quick to believe her accusations against me sent cards and apologies. Mrs. Canton brought casseroles for weeks and became an unexpected ally, using her social media influence to correct the narrative she'd helped spread. But the damage was done. Some people would always remember the initial story, the one where I was suspected of selling my child. That's how poison works. Even after you extract it, traces remain in the system. The lesson that haunts me isn't just about trusting the wrong people. It's about listening, really listening, to our children. Josie had tried to tell me something was wrong. She'd mentioned the new rules, the locked room, the way Grandma's house felt different. Brody had noticed his sister's fear, had heard her crying through the basement floor. They were telling me in the only way they knew how, and I had dismissed it as adjustment, as Francine being a bit strict but well-meaning. Evil doesn't always look like a stranger in a van or a shadowy figure in an alley. Sometimes it looks like a grandmother with perfectly styled hair, a pristine house, and homemade cookies cooling on the counter. Sometimes it comes with family photos on the walls and a key to your children's school. Sometimes it says, "I love you," while planning something unforgivable. Last week, Josie drew a picture in therapy that made her counselor smile. Our family of 3, holding hands under a bright yellow sun, standing in front of our new apartment with its many windows. No basement, no locked doors, just us, together and safe. She's sleeping through the night again, and last Tuesday she asked if she could start those dance classes. We start next week. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the warnings we sometimes miss or the trust we too easily give, please share this video with others who need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with family dynamics and the importance of believing children when they try to tell us something's wrong. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that remind us to trust our instincts and protect those we love. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the darkest moments, and sharing these stories might just help someone recognize the warning signs we missed. Thank you for listening to our story.